It was late one night, and I was combing through the archives of forgotten stories when I stumbled upon a peculiar article. Silvertree, a small town in Oregon, allegedly vanished from maps every few years, only to reappear as if it had never been gone. The idea sounded ridiculous at first, just another urban legend, but the more I searched, the stranger it became. There was almost nothing recent about the town, no updates, no current news. It was as if Silvertree had simply fallen off the face of the earth. My curiosity got the better of me, and before I knew it, I was packing my bags and heading out to investigate. The drive was long and winding, with dense forests closing in on both sides of the road. My GPS, which had been reliable until now, began to act up, flickering and recalculating routes that didn't make sense. But then, just as I started to doubt my decision, Silvertree appeared on the horizon, almost as if it had been waiting for me. The town looked like something out of a time capsule, eerie in its quiet isolation, beckoning me to uncover its secrets. As I drove into Silvertree, the first thing that struck me was how the town seemed frozen in time. The streets were lined with old-fashioned cars, the kind you'd expect to see in a 1950s postcard. The buildings, too, had a dated charm, with faded signs and peeling paint that spoke of a bygone era. But it wasn't just the architecture. The people matched the town's outdated feel. They wore clothes that seemed decades out of place, and their expressions were polite but guarded, as if they were trying to hide something. After parking, I checked into the only inn I could find, run by an elderly couple who eyed me with a mix of curiosity and caution. Their forced smiles did little to mask their unease as they handed me the key to a small, dusty room. The atmosphere was thick with something I couldn't quite put my finger on, an underlying tension that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. As I began to explore Silvertree, the oddities piled up. At the library and town hall, I found records that spoke of strange disappearances and unexplained events, but nothing from recent years. Everywhere I went, I felt a pair of unseen eyes following me, whispers in empty hallways, and I returned to my room only to find my belongings slightly moved, as if someone had been there. The town was alive with secrets, and I was beginning to sense I wasn't welcome. The more I dug into Silvertree's history, the more unnerving the town became. I found old newspapers and records buried deep in the town hall archives, detailing a pattern that sent chills down my spine. Every few years, Silvertree would disappear from maps, only to reappear later, with new residents who had arrived just before the town vanished. These new residents were never heard from again. My heart raced as I realized the significance. Silvertree wasn't just a strange town. It was a trap. As I pored over the dusty files, I noticed something even more disturbing. Familiar faces in the old photographs lining the town hall walls. The people in those photos looked terrified, their eyes wide with a fear that I now felt deep in my bones. It was as if they knew what was coming for them, just like I did now. I could hardly breathe as the weight of my situation settled in. Panic set in when I tried to leave the town. Every road I took twisted and turned, only to lead me back to the center of Silvertree. The townspeople, once merely distant, now seemed almost predatory, their polite smiles morphing into something more menacing. I was trapped, just like all those who had come before me. The reality hit me hard. I wasn't getting out of Silvertree alive. In a final, desperate attempt to understand what was happening, I rushed back to the town hall, hoping to find some clue, some way out. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, and then I saw it. A photograph newly added to the wall. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped closer, my eyes widening in horror. It was me. The image captured me exactly as I was now, down to the clothes I was wearing. The date on the photograph, however, was from decades ago. My worst fear was confirmed. Silvertree had claimed me. Panic surged through me as I bolted out of the town hall, desperately trying to escape the town's clutches. But the streets, which had once been eerily quiet, were now filling with townspeople. They emerged from their homes and shops, their expressions unnervingly calm, as if they had been expecting this all along. There was no malice in their eyes, only a cold inevitability that made my blood run cold. I stumbled through the streets, my mind reeling, but there was no escape. As I passed a shop window, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. My clothes had changed, no longer the modern attire I'd arrived in, but the same outdated clothing worn by the townspeople. I looked like I belonged here, like I had always been part of Silvertree. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was trapped, and there was no way out. As the town began to fade from reality, taking me with it, I knew I was just another lost soul, swallowed by Silvertree forever. I was driving through the winding backroads of Kentucky, enjoying the freedom of my solo road trip, when I spotted a weathered sign for a town called Hollow Brook. Oddly enough, it wasn't on my map, but something about the name piqued my curiosity. Without thinking twice, I turned off the main road and followed the narrow, tree-lined path into the unknown. Hollow Brook was like something out of a storybook, a quaint, charming town with cozy, old-fashioned houses and well-tended gardens. The townspeople smiled warmly as I passed by, their friendly nods making me feel instantly at ease. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic setting, I felt a strange undercurrent, a sensation I couldn't quite place, as if something was subtly off. As I wandered through the quiet streets, admiring the vintage architecture, I began to hear it. Faint whispers, almost too soft to notice. At first, I brushed them off, thinking it was just the wind rustling through the trees. But the whispers persisted, growing slightly louder with each step I took. A chill ran down my spine as I realized they seemed to be coming from the ground beneath my feet. The whispers nagged at me, their eerie persistence gnawing away at the peace I'd felt when I first arrived. I couldn't ignore them any longer, so I started asking the locals about the strange sounds. Every person I spoke to was friendly, but their responses were always the same. A quick, firm denial, paired with a smile that never reached their eyes. Whispers. Can't say I've heard anything like that, they'd say, their expressions tightening just a little. The more I asked, the more I noticed the unease beneath their polite facades, and the more unsettled I became. As the day wore on and the whispers refused to fade, I decided to find a place to stay. I checked into a quaint bed and breakfast run by an elderly woman who welcomed me with open arms. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of warning, as she handed me the key. "Best you stay inside after dark, dear," she advised, her voice laced with an urgency that sent a shiver down my spine. That night, sleep came uneasily, and when it did, it brought with it a dream so vivid it felt more like a memory. In my dream, Hollow Brook was different, older. The townspeople were gathered in the town square, their faces obscured by dark hoods, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. I watched, frozen in horror, as they performed rituals under the cover of night. The fear was palpable, clinging to me even as I jolted awake, my heart racing. The whispers were louder now, almost as if they were trying to tell me something. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to my mind. But as I looked out the window, a new terror gripped me. The town I had found so charming yesterday was gone, replaced by the eerie vision from my dream. Thick fog blanketed the streets, and an unnatural silence hung in the air, pressing in on me. My breath caught in my throat as the whispers, now louder and more distinct, surrounded me, weaving through the mist like ghostly tendrils. They were no longer just background noise. They were voices, insistent and urgent, almost as if they were speaking directly to me. Desperate for answers, I threw on my clothes and ventured outside, my heart pounding in my chest. The townspeople I encountered were not the warm, welcoming faces I remembered. Their eyes were hollow, empty voids, and their movements were slow and deliberate, as if they were gliding rather than walking. It was then that I realized the horrifying truth. These weren't people. They were spirits, the ghosts of those who had once lived in Hollow Brook. With cold dread settling in my bones, they began to speak, their voices a chilling chorus that echoed the whispers. They told me about the dark rituals they had performed, cursed forever to relive their past. And now, they needed a sacrifice, someone to take their place and sustain their cursed existence. My blood ran cold as I understood. I had been lured here for this very purpose. I was the final piece in their ritual, the sacrifice they had been waiting for. The whispers grew louder, closing in around me, as I realized there was no escape. The whispers grew louder, reaching a deafening pitch that made my ears ring and my heart race. Panic set in as I tried to run, but the town seemed to close in around me, the fog thickening like a cage. The ghostly townspeople, their hollow eyes locked on me, began to chant the same ancient words I'd heard in my dream, their voices merging with the whispers, their faces twisted with a sickening mix of sorrow and anticipation, as if they both pitied and eagerly awaited my fate. The ground beneath my feet started to tremble, and I stumbled, the vibrations pulsing through my legs like a heartbeat. The whispers, I suddenly realized, were more than just disembodied voices. They were the cries of those who had come before me, victims of the same dark ritual that was now claiming me. The earth seemed to pulse with their agony, their voices rising from the depths to drag me down with them. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the cacophony of whispers, swallowed whole by the chorus of the damned. The townspeople closed in, their chants growing louder as the ground split open beneath me, the dark forces of Hollow Brook consuming me entirely. I could feel my body being pulled into the earth, the whispers wrapping around my soul, binding me to the curse that haunted this place. As the world around me faded to black, the last thing I heard was the echo of my own scream, mingling with the voices of the past. Hollow Brook returned to its serene, idyllic state, ready to lure in its next unsuspecting traveler, while the whispers continued to grow, now with my voice among them. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon as we made our way through the winding paths of the English countryside, backpacks slung over our shoulders, the cool air filled with the scent of wildflowers and earth. It had been a day of aimless wandering, soaking in the beauty of the landscape, when we heard it, a distant melody, the faint sound of laughter carried on the breeze. Curious, we followed the sounds until the trees parted, revealing a small town nestled in a valley, its cobblestone streets alive with music and dancing. Harrow's End, the sign read, though none of us had ever heard of it before. The town was bursting with life, its square filled with colorful stalls offering tantalizing aromas of freshly cooked food, and townsfolk twirling in lively dances. The warmth and energy of the festival were infectious, and before we knew it, We were being welcomed by the locals, their smiles bright and genuine, their invitations to join in impossible to resist. We threw caution to the wind, diving into the festivities with glee. The food was delicious, the music entrancing, and the dances spun us into a world of laughter and joy. As the night deepened, the festival only grew more vibrant, the revelry never seeming to slow. There were no signs of fatigue in the townspeople, no clocks to remind us of the time. Caught up in the magic of the moment, we decided to stay longer, entranced by the endless celebration that surrounded us. The night wore on, but the energy in Harrow's End never waned. I danced and laughed with my friends, but a gnawing feeling began to creep in. I pulled out my phone to check the time, but there was no signal. Odd, I thought, glancing around for a clock. There wasn't a single one in sight. I checked my watch, and my stomach tightened. The hands hadn't moved, stuck at the same time for what felt like hours. Yet, the festival continued unabated, the music as lively as ever, the townspeople showing no signs of slowing down. The unease in my chest grew as I noticed a change in my friends. They seemed less like themselves, forgetting small details, acting like strangers. When I asked Jamie about the trip we had planned for the next day, she just stared at me blankly, as if she didn't remember. Tom, who had always been the first to suggest leaving when we partied too long, now seemed utterly absorbed. His eyes glazed over as he swayed to the music. I tried to voice my concerns, telling them something wasn't right, that we needed to leave, but they only laughed, brushing me off. "Come on, Justice," Tom said, his voice distant. "It's just a party. Don't be such a buzzkill." But the fear in my gut told me this was more than just a party. Something was terribly wrong, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. Panic set in as the full weight of my situation hit me. The festival was a trap, a sinister, never-ending cycle designed to lure in outsiders and erase their identities. My friends were already slipping away, their memories of who they were fading into the endless festivities. I had to get out, but every attempt to escape was futile. No matter which street or alley I took, I found myself right back in the center of the celebration, surrounded by music and laughter that now felt menacing. The townspeople, who had once seemed so welcoming, now appeared ominous. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too bright, as if they knew something I didn't. Their gazes followed me wherever I went, and I could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on me, as if they were waiting for me to give up and join them. Just when I was on the verge of despair, an old man stepped out of the shadows, his face lined with age and weariness. His eyes were filled with a sorrow I couldn't comprehend. "You're trying to escape, aren't you?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He claimed to be the last person to escape Harrow's End, warning me that the town wouldn't let me go easily. He gave me cryptic instructions, unsettling actions I had to take at certain points in the town, all while avoiding the townspeople's gaze. "You only have one chance," he said, his voice trembling. "If you fail, you'll be trapped here forever, just like the others." His words sent a chill through me, but I knew I had no choice. It was now or never. With the old man's cryptic instructions echoing in my mind, I plunged into the maze of Harrow's End. My friends were almost gone, their identities swallowed by the festival, and I knew I had little time left. The town seemed to sense my desperation. The music blared louder, the lights flared brighter, and the once inviting streets twisted into a nightmarish labyrinth. Every corner I turned brought me face to face with townspeople whose smiles had stretched into grotesque grins, their eyes following me with unnatural intensity. I fought against the rising tide of panic, forcing myself to focus on the old man's words. The instructions were bizarre. Tap 3 times on a certain lamppost, walk backward across the town square, circle the fountain. But I followed them to the letter, each step feeling like a razor-thin line between escape and eternal entrapment. The eerie townspeople seemed to close in on me, their gazes growing sharper, as if they knew what I was trying to do. But I kept moving, avoiding their eyes, my heart pounding with fear and determination. Finally, I saw it, the edge of town where the streets gave way to the open countryside. With one last burst of energy, I sprinted toward it, my breath ragged, my pulse deafening in my ears. I crossed the boundary just as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, stumbling into the dewy grass of the countryside. I turned back, but Harrow's End was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. Relief washed over me, but it was hollow. I was free, but my friends were lost to the festival, their faces already fading from my memory. I pulled out my phone and stared at a photo of us, taken just days before, wondering if I would ever truly escape the grip of that cursed town. The festival's music still echoed faintly in my mind, a haunting reminder that some things, once seen, can never be forgotten.